Okay, welcome to the Esports Research Report. I'm Dr. Brian McCauley. Steph can't be here, and I'm here at the Media Management and Transformation Center in Jönköping, the city of DreamHack in Sweden. Now, today our guest is a former professional Starcraft player. He is head of player development at Shopify Rebellion. So I'd like to introduce Dario Wünsch. Wünsch. How do I say it, Dario?
Wünsch. It's you got very close, so no hard
Okay, so welcome to the show. So, just tell us a little bit about yourself for anyone who mightn't know you.
All right. So, my name is Dario. I've been in esports, which now feels basically forever, especially in esports terms. I started playing video games when I was like 3 years old. I have 3 older brothers, so we always played video games against each other. I kind of was born with like this competitive, motivation, and I started being more formally part of the esports scene when I was 12. I started competing online. I started going to my first event, joining my first like clans, which, not professional teams or anything like this.
Nine, yeah. Pro League 9s, is that going to happen? Are we going to have that in the future? Are kids going to be that advanced? 9-year-olds, professionals?
There are some players who, not 9, but definitely plenty of players with 11, 12, 13. You can already tell they're like on a path. And some of the best Starcraft players in the world, they started going to their first like professional events when they were 12, 13. And now they're like 18, 19, the best players in the world. So, I don't think we're going to see world champions at that age because it takes a lot of years to hone in your skill. But some people are definitely starting their path at that age. And
what about you at that age? Were you like a prodigy? Were you beating your brothers at that age?
When I was about 12, it's probably when I started distinguishing myself from like just my friends and brothers, where I started not really losing many games against them anymore, and I started playing online. And I had that experience, I think, that many people at that age made when they first started playing online, because back then that was not necessarily given right from the first time you touch a game, where you think, oh my god, I'm so good at this game, I'm just going to go online, I'm going to be one of the best players in the world. And then turns out there were actually tens of thousands of people better than me at that stage, and I was very humbled but very intrigued by, okay, I have so much more to learn. And that was, that really clicked for me, by like, I want to do this.
Okay, so we start off with the first main question is, what's your definition of esports from your perspective?
Honestly, I don't have that strict of a definition. I think a lot of people get really caught up with the sports part of esports, and there's a lot of discussions, is it really a sport or something like this? For me, I prefer almost the term competitive gaming. I don't think we need to, label ourselves in any way that, gives us, we are here, we're big. Like, I think it's very clear it's a very skillful, complicated thing to do. So I'm fine with esports, I'm fine with competitive gaming. Like any game really that is organized in like a competitive fashion, obviously something that can't be played competitively, I wouldn't call an esport. Something that is just like inherently casual, I wouldn't call it an esport. But if it's like Mario Party that is happening like in a highly organized, competitive way, that's an esport for me. And so it's like, of course, CSGO, Starcraft or something more like elaborately made to be an esport.
I don't know about Mario Party, man. I've had too many of that little fairy floating down and screwing up my game, and it's not fair. It's too much looking at for me, or bad.
Maybe. Like, I actually don't know enough about Mario Party to know if you could have, like, I guess one prerequisite would be for sure that there's not so much luck that there wouldn't be clearly people that can be better than others.
Okay, so you're TLO, and that's what you're known as. That's what you're famous for in StarCraft. Why did you start off calling yourself the Little One?
So it's pretty cute. I used to play together with my older brother. I have 3 older brothers, but I played mostly together with my youngest older brother. And we started playing a RTS called Supreme Commander in around like 2006. And we often played 2v2. So he was the big one, I was the little one. Eventually it abbreviated to TBO and TLO.
And I think you're probably glad at that. You wouldn't like if I was saying, now welcome to the little one onto the podcast.
I have no problem. I have no problem with that. I have no like masculine ego there.
Okay, you don't need a masculine ego because your beard had a fan club. Tell me about this. This is one of my favorite stories I found out so far.
I just at some point started growing a really big beard, and it was somebody who was on Team Liquid, my prior team, that did a lot of content. His name is Ken, or better known as Hotbit in the scene, and he just told me, you should just start growing a beard until you win a tournament. And I never won a tournament, not a big one. So at some point, I made some conditions where, okay, maybe I don't have to win like a big like championship, but maybe if I win like X amount of online cups, I get to cut it, because at some point, like, my beard would literally be going to my, below my hips at this point.
I think you had a loophole though. I looked at some pictures and it wasn't the beard; it was the haircut accompanying the beard. You should have had a haircut, and the beard could have been magnificent on its own. But it got a fan club. I mean, and this is all based in StarCraft, of course. This is where your career was, and you were 10 years with Team Liquid.
Yeah, correct.
And so, first of all, for anyone who doesn't know what StarCraft is, in very simple terms, how do you describe what you do to your parents or your older family members?
So StarCraft, in my opinion, is probably one of the hottest, most competitive esports that ever existed. It's a real-time strategy game. Chess, for example, would be a turn-based strategy game where you make one move, then the other player, and then you can think about it, the other player makes a move, right? Obviously, there are things like bullet chess that go very quickly, but it's still like turn by turn. Real-time strategy means, imagine a much, much, much larger chessboard with many more pieces, and both players can act in real time and don't have to wait for the other person to make a move. And you balance an economy. So you start with just a few pieces, and then you can make some workers to like harvest resources, and you can build up infrastructure, and then eventually make an army. Both players have incomplete information, so rather than seeing the other half of the board like in a chessboard, you only see what's close to your own pieces, and then you need to gather information. So there's some aspect where it's often compared to poker in that sense, where you need to gather information on your opponent.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I always like to describe it as a mix of boxing, poker, and playing an instrument at the same time. And
while blindfolded in a dark room.
A little bit like that. And so it really combines pretty much everything when it comes to competitive gaming into like one thing. And it's impossible to ever play a perfect match, which is what I loved about it. You can always improve something.
Well, I've watched it live, and what I kind of observed from it was there's always these moments where the whole crowd goes, "Oh!" they see something happening, right? So you must have been responsible for a lot of that, because my extensive research has said that you had a lot of, you were known for unusual strategies and disruptive techniques. And how did you come by that style? Was that just what worked on your brothers early on and you kept it up, or was it an evolution of you as you figured out the darkened room of combinations?
I would say the way my style, especially in the earlier years, when things were less figured out and you could do more crazy things, comes from the fact that I played so many different games throughout my life. As I said, I picked up gaming at a very young age, and I played probably at least 50 different RTS throughout that time until I started playing StarCraft almost exclusively. So I came in just with a very open mind, because I've seen so many different things you can do in different games. And I started playing StarCraft. So StarCraft has 3 different factions, but you can also play random, which just assigns a random faction to you at the start of the game. And I started playing random in the beta primarily to figure out how the game really works from every single perspective, because all 3 factions are very different. So I think that helped me just get like a very general understanding of the game, and then just adapting on the fly.
Well, see, the Dennis Bergkamp, the famous Dutch player who played for Arsenal, when he was at the Ajax, that famous Dutch football team, for anyone who doesn't know, they had a thing that they would put people in different positions in the youth levels, so that if you were a striker, you'd also play as a defender in training. And I think your approach kind of mirrors that adaptability. Really, it makes a lot of sense, and maybe a lot of people are stuck in their one channel in their various games or esports. I'm a sniper, I'm this, I'm that, and I don't do anything else. So that quite makes sense for me. Not the game is so complicated just to watch. So tell me what you think of Starcraft at the moment? How has it evolved since the early days and what it is like for you now? Are you still playing? You're still playing a bit, right?
Yeah, I'm still playing a good amount. Relatively effortlessly, like on the ladder, just automated matchmaking. I can be like top 40 in Europe, maybe like top 16 in North America, probably, which is, sounds very high level, but it's not really good enough to
and top 10,000 in South Korea?
No.
South Korea,
Like
South
Korea
is like the
South Korea was really big in StarCraft 1. StarCraft 2 actually is not that popular in Korea. There's the best players in the world are, arguably still in Korea, especially if you just look at like the top 16. We have like a few people sprinkled in that are definitely in the top 5 outside of Korea now. But a lot of like really good players because of the legacy of StarCraft 1, but it's not that deep. So, I could probably easily be top 100 in Korea. So it's not that big of a difference.
And I'm curious, the difference between StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2 from your perspective. So you started in StarCraft 1, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the two games were both part of your career as a professional player.
I wouldn't say I was a professional player on StarCraft 1, but a competitive player on a high level. Yeah.
And then so StarCraft 2 is where you started to. Was that an advantage? Did you start to take off when this new platform came and you could use your strategic innovation?
Absolutely. When StarCraft 2 was announced, I specifically started practicing way more StarCraft 1 in preparation for StarCraft 2 because I knew the game was going to be similar. And I felt like even though I started when I was 12, well, actually, I first played when I was 8, but really started playing competitively when I was 12. I felt I kind of missed the start of it because I was so young. In Germany, I couldn't go to LAN parties. They were like 18 plus at that time because whenever there was basically one 18 plus game, the entire LAN had to be 18 plus. We had a big thing in Germany back then about, violent games, and that made it very hard.
I know a lot about it.
Yeah. And so I couldn't really compete. And I also didn't have a great internet connection. So
I know that about Germany too. All my German friends are always complaining about that.
Yeah, it's better now, obviously, but back then it was ridiculous. We had a 56K modem, even though we were on top of fiber optics cables that were like built after the reunification. I'm from East Germany, so East Germany has pretty good infrastructure because a lot of things were built new, but there was no provider for fiber optics. So you have a 56K modem on top of fiber optics, which is like the most infuriating thing ever. We were jealous of the street across because they had copper cables. So I kind of missed the boat a little bit. And then I knew StarCraft 2 is coming out, and I've always had a dream to be a programmer since I was 12. Went to my first like convention, saw people play competitively where I could. And then StarCraft 2 came out, and I just wanted to do my best trying to become a real programmer.
So you've lived your dream. you've done, you're 31 now or so, and you've had your career as a professional. I mean, what do you think of the current crop of players there? What do you think of the scene as it stands? Would you like to be in it, or have you had enough and you're glad to get out of that pressure?
So I definitely will always be a competitive person, and part of me will always miss being a pro level player going to events. There are some advantages. I definitely feel more relaxed now. There's a lot of stress that comes with that, a lot of financial stress that came with that. StarCraft 2 is not necessarily the most profitable game. It's, if you're not on one of the very best players in the world, it's very hard to make a full-time living, especially now that I have a family and I live in Toronto, which is a very expensive city. The StarCraft 2 salary plus prize money, unless you're like, literally one of the top 5 players, is probably not gonna, sustain you long term. So on that side, it's much better to have a more stable job. But I love the scene. One of the reasons maybe why I love the scene so much is because there's very few people that are in it for the money. Like it is still like kind of like old school esports where almost everybody just loves the game that is working in it, that's playing in it, and there's very few people that are doing it for clout or like financial reasons because it's not a good financial choice.
So it's like a throwback scene, really. It's like it's still there in the LAN era to a certain extent. I mean, what do you see about the future of the StarCraft scene? Because, esports, obviously, we're the Esports Research Network. It's since 2014, it's all taken off. There's so much. Valorant's come out, and, Overwatch came out, and CSGO came out, as opposed to the original CSGO. I mean, what do you think the future of StarCraft will be in the modern esports massive ecosystem.
So I think StarCraft will always be around. It's extremely stable, even though, it isn't one of the most popular games anymore. The player base has been very stable. The viewership has been very stable. And it's, I think, not a scene. It's a relatively, it's not that expensive a scene to fund. And it has so much love in it, and not just in StarCraft. There's so many people that are in Dota and CS, and like people that are in important companies in esports that they recognize the importance of StarCraft. It almost, in the same way that, not in the same way maybe, but if an esport, in the same way that chess has a lot of cultural value that people recognize, even if it's not as profitable as, football or something like that. There will always be people that have a strong interest in keeping it around because it recognizes something beautiful. There's something like almost autistic about it. So I think StarCraft is always going to be okay. And it's just questionable if it's going to grow again. But it's going to be around. And eventually maybe there will be another RTS that kind of takes the mantle that will maybe be similar to StarCraft. I'd be excited for that. But
what about StarCraft 3? What about StarCraft 3? Could that happen?
I mean, very unlikely to happen. So unfortunately, Activision Blizzard doesn't seem very interested in StarCraft as a whole, or RTS. Making an RTS was very hard. However, there is a lot of people that are ex-Blizzard that are working on RTS now. So there's a company called Frost Giant that is pretty much exclusively ex-StarCraft 2 team, and they're working on an RTS. So that's really exciting because, maybe that will be the quote-unquote StarCraft 3. It just won't be called that, and it's going to be different and new. But I'm excited. There might be like a new golden age of RTS around the corner eventually. You never know.
So, as an old man now, even though you're 10 years younger than me, but you're old man in esports terms, tell me about this new role that you have in Shopify Rebellion, the next step in Dario TLO Starcraft Extraordinary Player.
So about a year ago, I joined Shopify after leaving Team Liquid. My role when I first started was esports program manager. So basically, there was not like a completely formulated plan yet that we will have an esports team. Even though it was like in the early discussions, we were thinking about it. So we started out with some sponsorships, and then eventually it became obvious, yes, we definitely want to have a team. And so my role is basically the head coach of the team. So we have 3 teams currently: StarCraft, Valorant, and Rocket League. The StarCraft team I pretty much take care of directly. And then we have a Rocket League coach and a Valorant coach. So I work closely with those 2 to help the players, and then also work directly with the players themselves. So while the coaches for Valorant and Rocket League, they're going to be more focused on intricate in-game strategy and stuff like this that, I have some knowledge of, but I'm not an expert. I focus more on providing a nurturing environment for the players, making sure they have everything they need to compete on the highest level. That goes from, physical barriers, recognizing, okay, a player might need therapy or something like this. What can we provide? Or mental, barriers in game, which are obviously huge in esports because it's such a mental high pressure environment. And I definitely know how that feels, having competed for so long. Or, interpersonal problems, team games. You basically need to trust each other blindly. Things will always come up. We have a great group of people, but it's working on communication with everybody is incredibly important in team games. It's more so even in esport games, I think, than in regular sports because it's so fast paced.
No, I agree with you here. I always say that you'd learn more in an evening of CSGO about teamwork and strategy than a week of training in football.
Yeah.
Because it's bang, 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 communicate. It's not like, go along. It's so good. And I think it's so healthy for people to learn those problem solving and strategy skills and communication skills and teamwork. And, I'm a university professor. So, we're always like, you're doing group work. No, we don't want to do group work. And it's like, welcome to, I don't like my group mates. Wait till you're in work and you don't like your workmates. This is one project in one class. Wait till you're stuck with someone for a year. I mean, so the concept of teams in StarCraft is so I want to dig into a little bit because, with Team Liquid, how many people were in that team? Or was it, what was that about?
So for Team Liquid, for like the Starcraft team exclusively, it ranged somewhere from like 5 to, I think at the very peak it might have been 9 players.
So 9 players could be in the same tournament and friends, train together, same employer, and then they're competing against each other?
Absolutely.
And so was that like, with that for team, was you kind of looking at the draw going, okay, brilliant, we've got 4 on that side and 4 on that side,
Yeah.
oh my God, they're all clumped together in the quarterfinals.
So Team Liquid definitely always had a relatively large roster on StarCraft, and we are kind of known for like the team kill curse. And even now that it's a smaller team of 4 or 5 people, it's always like a bummer when 3 of them end up in like one group together.
Yeah.
But yeah, it happens. It's the nature of a 1v1 game that you might up playing against practice partners, teammates, etc.
I mean, so you have 3 people on this team currently, and we'll get into that. But I mean, so they train together a lot, or do they sort of train against, other professionals, or how does that work? Do you have 1 against 1? You go, okay, you're out, you're in. Winner stays on, like old school.
Right. So we are not constantly forcing them to just like play against each other, because first of all, with 3 people that's difficult, but also you need a wide range of opponents in StarCraft to like gather as much information as possible about different styles. But they, having teammates in a team, it's like, first of all, these are people you trust. They're not going to share strategies with third parties. They're going to help you out during tournaments. They're going to share intelligence between each other. So there's a lot of value having a team or close group of practice partners in StarCraft, even if you don't directly compete together. We also play in a team league, which is called the World Team League Together. It's still individual one-on-ones, but you decide which player is going to go out on what map, and like who's going to be the ace player in the end, and things like that. So there's still a team element to it, but it's primarily about helping each other out. And of course, as a team, is also about hedging your bets a little bit. Like just having 1 player makes it less likely you're going to end up having the player that goes deep, right? So there's some value in that, of course, as a team. But so we all help each other out. And it's quite interesting because StarCraft is a one-on-one game, but in my opinion, it's one of the most social games out there when it comes to it actually being very important that you communicate well with others. I've seen people that are very unliked by the majority of players filter out because nobody wants to practice with them. Nobody wants to share information with them. While in a team game, I think it's easier to have, this is my clique. And if I'm a star player, even my team might tolerate me just because I'm going to like push the team forward.
Yeah.
Nobody needs to tolerate even a one-on-one game. I don't need to interact with you. Even if you're my teammate, my team is not going to be mad at me probably for like not like, doing too much with them. While if you in a team game, obviously would jeopardize an entire team. Like sometimes you just have to tolerate somebody who's miserable to work with just because they're that good. I always find that
I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's really interesting. That to me is a really interesting insight. That first of all, you say that StarCraft is this very close knit community that shares and everything, and it kind of. There was an Australian football team in Sydney, the Sydney Swans, and their rule is literally no dickheads.
Mm-hmm.
That was their whole team ethos. And it seems that like when, I play a lot of CSGO and you get toxicity, obviously, especially solo queuing and matchmaking. But I really love the idea that the single player esport can actually engender a better sense of community and, better behavior towards each other, or you're cut out socially. That's an interesting proposition. It's actually something a lot of people wouldn't think about, and definitely worth a research paper by somebody if they haven't done it already. I mean, so how are you adapting towards your new role as manager? How's that going for you?
I think it's going really well. Obviously a lot of the things on the managerial side and maybe even on the leadership side are a little bit new to me, but there's so much value in having just experienced the player side for so many years. I know what I liked. I know what I didn't like. I love, I know what I loved, what my team did for me. And I know what, that my team didn't do for me that I might have liked. And like the same for tournament organizers. So just being able to connect with players where if a series isn't going well, and then I can tell them, I know exactly how it feels when you start having a very negative mantra in your mind of just saying like, I suck, that I'm so bad, how could I miss this shot? Yeah. So I know this on like a deeply intimate level because I was unfortunately a player who was not very kind to himself, and it was a huge barrier for me. And I'm going to be able to see that when that is happening, when those thoughts are being internalized more quickly than somebody that, might have a more formal, coaching education, but not specifically has esport experience, because it looks very different when somebody plays tennis, when somebody plays football, where there's a lot more adrenaline, there's a lot more physical stuff happening than when somebody's sitting in front of a PC, right? Things are a bit more subtle sometimes. And
I think I'd find it much more relaxing to play tennis against Venus Williams than I would to play StarCraft against any random person. That looks, what is it, 165 clicks or actions per minute or something?
It can be more
absolutely.
than that. Yeah, and I have some theories why just like amateur physiological explanations why it's actually more stressful to play something like StarCraft or like other video games than sometimes a physical sport. So I'm no doctor. I know I'm not a biologist, so I don't want to make any claims that makes anybody angry. But from my understanding, a lot of times this feeling of like nervousness and like nausea you can get, like for example before an exam or when you're playing video games, could be explained partially by lots of adrenaline, but not enough physical activity for you to have like that adrenaline actually being transported throughout your body, and like you're kind of like in fight mode, but then your body is not doing the things you're supposed to be doing, or being highly physical, right? So we're not like evolutionary, we're not really made for this. So we need to like think about when this happens, how can we do what our body needs at that time to actually benefit from the adrenaline, benefit for like the hormonal changes that happen in our body rather than being crushed by them.
Well, of course, before an exam, you could cheekily have a double whiskey, relax, you still do as well in the exam, but a double whiskey with all those actions in every split second in StarCraft would absolutely throw you off your game. So there's almost no way of kind of adapting to it. So let's talk about the team now you have. So you have 3 members of your team. Bayun, am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
What can you tell me about him?
Byan, so he's our player in Korea. So the 3 players we're talking about, the StarCraft team.
Yeah, Lambo and Scarlet as well.
Yeah. Byan is a former world champion. He's
2016, I do believe.
2016, and then was it 2018 that he had to go to the military for 2 years, which is mandatory in Korea, which for many players in Korea is like kind of like the end of the career. Often like, okay, I have time until to do this, and many Korean pro gamers, they can push it back further because they have like a reason. They can tell the government, hey, I'm a professional player, like this would end my career, so can I do it as late as possible? But eventually they're going to be like, okay, you have to go. And and so he came back from the military. He started playing again. Very quickly won like one of the online tournaments, an online tournament put on by Aces RG, and very quickly was on top again. He does
maybe the break did him good. Maybe it's like it's like an extended holiday that you refresh.
Actually, I think it was good for him because he was suffering from a lot of physical barriers. He is known to have like a lot of wrist pain. Or numbness. He plays an extremely mechanical style, and he's a Terran player, which are most known to be prone for that issue in StarCraft because they're the most mechanical faction.
When you say mechanical, what do you kind of mean? That the most actions has to happen?
Yeah, the most mechanical as in like fastest on the keyboard, most accurate on the mouse, like very jerky movements that can be hard on the body. And so he came back, and after that online success, he struggled a little bit at offline events in Korea, and I've started working with him. There's definitely some, psychological reasons, lots of stress, tons of pressure on himself, and so at first
which everyone can identify with. Everyone gets that in every situation. StarCraft is just wow, boom.
Yeah, absolutely, and we worked with him a little bit, and he's been public about it. So I'm not sharing anything too private here. So at first, okay, let's get him a physical therapist. But then it turns out, they couldn't really find necessarily what was causing numbness. For example, he was experiencing during a match. Like the first thought is like, is it carpal tunnel, etc. It was not. So then, and now he started working with a psychologist because 2 different opinions. That we gathered were of the opinion that it might be psychological more so than physical. And, obviously you can get incredibly tense during a match where, lots of what we do in our wrist stems from the neck, shoulders. If we like tighten this too much,
Adjusting my
nerves.
position now as I'm sitting here doing this podcast.
Everybody relax a little bit, and that seems to he seems to be doing better now, so that's great.
It's great when someone's very open about this stuff, because there's a very often got young audience to any sort of pressures, mental health issues. It's brilliant that these people are role models.
Yeah,
I mean, so tell me about Lambo. What's his story?
So Lambo is one of the quote unquote younger players in StarCraft, but I think he's like 25 or 26 at this point as well. So in esports terms, not that young, but in StarCraft terms, like I still remember, because I'm older, I guess I remember him as a very young player. So he's from Germany, lives in München, and he's an overall great guy. He's like probably our more extroverted player on the team, streams a lot, highly strategic, very good in preparation matches. So in StarCraft, preparation is a huge deal where okay, I'm facing this player in the top 16. So I know I'm playing that player for sure. I'm going to watch every single replay I can find of that player to narrow down what strategies do they play, try to counterplay, what are their styles, what are their weaknesses, what are small markers I can find in that game where, without even seeing everything they're doing, I can extrapolate on their strategy based on this one marker I find that maybe they're not even aware of themselves. So he's one of the best players in the world at doing that. He struggles.
You don't play him at poker though, right? He's just watching you. He's kind of you're bluffing.
Yeah, exactly. So he's extremely good at that. Sometimes he struggles a little bit once he gets past that phase. So often he made like a top 8, where he could have like those first 2 opponents maybe figured out, and then for a long time he never made it past that top 8, but finally he had a breakthrough, and it looked like he was gonna win the spring season in Europe, but then fell short against and just got second place. But so he's still under like our team. He had the highest result he's ever had, so I'm really happy about that. And he's developing, and he's really easy to work with. All the StarCraft people honestly are pretty easy to work with.
I mean, look, just listening to you, I'm going, look, okay, first of all, I'm 40 and it's a very complicated game, and I don't have any time to be crap at a game for a couple of 1,000 hours. But it just seems like such a mentally pressured game, and so, I mean, like, just listening to you and their experiences, I mean, okay, so finally Scarlett, who was 2016 Esport Woman of the Year, I do believe.
Yeah, she won the IM in Pyeongchang. And Scarlett has always fascinated me. She's always been one of the, I think, most intelligent players that StarCraft ever had. She's extremely talented in gaming in general. Like, she's the kind of woman who can just pick up any game and be incredibly good at it. I'm pretty sure at some point, if she would have like pushed harder, she could have become a Dota pro as well, because she played Dota on a very high level.
Wow.
And like, I could see her like picking up any game and like being incredible at it, because she has a good mind. I think the biggest thing for her was often that maybe she didn't put in as much work in as maybe she could have or wanted to, and sometimes maybe that held her back. But sometimes people also start putting in a lot of work and it actually hinders them. So
she's too talented.
Maybe she is too talented. But so people, like, she kind of dropped off a little bit, and people were questioning, is like, are we ever going to see the Scarlet of old? But she's been more motivated than ever. I feel she's been practicing way more again, like, since she joined our team, and it's really good to see. And she's had a lot of really good results. That it looks like very likely she's going to qualify for the World Championships from North America this year. Almost impossible for her not at this point, because she had 2 very good seasons so far. And in the end, I feel like our team just tries to get rid of some of the stressors people have in their lives, and then they just enable them, and then they can just naturally thrive. And that seems to be working out well so far.
Okay, so after listening to that, I'm wondering, which one is the most similar to you as a player? Which one do you see the most of yourself as a player? I mean, they're different players.
Yeah.
Which one is the one that kind of you see, okay, yeah, you're a bit like me, or is there bits of you on each of them?
I would say There's definitely a bit of each in like at different stages of my career in them, but Scarlett and I are probably most alike as players. And there's an anecdote that proves that we played a tournament. It was a Homestar Cup. I don't remember which number anymore. And we both play Zerg. So we both play the same factions. And a Zerg, you can send out like a slow-moving scouting unit at the start of the game called an Overlord. And usually you send it to the second base of your opponent to find out, are they playing a one base, which would mean like a very aggressive, risky strategy to just end the game quickly, or do you expand and build up your economy, which is a more standard way to play. And on this particular map, there's a second base, and then there's a third base on another location. And we both send our Overlord to the normally spot of the second base. Our scout arrives at the same time, and we both write at the same time, oh, you're faking not having a second base too, because we both build our base on the third base instead of the second to make it look like a risky, fast strategy. So, that was a really funny moment where because both of us were doing the same thing, we also immediately figured out, oh, you're doing the same thing I'm doing. You're not actually aggressive. You're probably faking me out. I believe I lost that game, but it might have won the series. Either way, it was 3-2 or 2-3. I could look it up. But
okay, I promised you no awkward questions, but this one was given to me. How good is the CEO of Shopify, Toby, in StarCraft? He's a big fan. He's supporting you so well, but
Toby's quite good. But far from pro level, of course. I think last time, so he did stream a little bit of StarCraft last year actually, and I do believe he was in Diamonds. But he's a pretty talented player, and if he would have more time, I'm confident he could be a master level player with a little bit more practice.
I mean, it must be great having the CEO is like into what you're doing, and it's not just it's business, of course, but as well to have someone passionate about it must be a really fantastic feeling to know that somebody's supporting you in the whole project. I mean, that's brilliant.
Absolutely, and it's it doesn't just feel good; it's a huge strategic advantage for us because it means. The company as a whole understands sometimes the more long-term plans we make, and that if you want to build something great, and Shopify in general as a company knows that sometimes first you need to invest something without getting returns immediately, and like being an esports for us is a very long-term thing, while many teams in esports are forced to think quarter by quarter. They know, they need to attract sponsors. They need to justify, investors, and always need to think, and often they compromise their brand doing that because obviously you have a brand identity, and every time you get a sponsor, you might have to sacrifice some of that. Some brands understand very well how to team up with you in a way that's beneficial to both brands, but some teams are like, I give you a lot of money. You're just gonna plus whatever I am as a company, and we don't really care so much about you, but because we give you a lot of money, you're okay with that. But long term, that can hurt you as a team and as a brand, right? Well, we are just backed by Shopify directly. We are part of the company, so we don't have to make sacrifices and compromises like that.
No, I mean, look, I'm very lucky that Leona and Yerker and my bosses here understand what I'm doing. And that's why I can have toys in my office and not look like an idiot, even though I'm 40. But, for a lot of esports researchers, and going for grants sometimes for older academics who don't understand it, I mean, it's like if you're CEO, that's just an investment. We understand that feeling of not being supported because somebody doesn't really understand it properly. So, I mean, I can see how it's an advantage having such a StarCraft geek as your CEO. Okay, so we got a couple more questions to finish up. I mean, so just the Valorant Game Changer team, what's that about?
So we have an all-women's team in Valorant. Game Changers is a program funded by Riot that is the biggest. I think I'm not gonna somebody correct me if I'm wrong after this. I think it's the biggest initiative to fund women's tournaments in esports so far. And
sounds like Riot.
Yeah, and
you're good like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And while definitely I'm a strong believer that eventually, like, there shouldn't be a difference between women and men, and eventually maybe we can just have co-ed competitions. I think it's an amazing just co-ed competitions. I think it's an amazing initiative because anybody that's in co-ed gaming knows the barriers that women face. I think
this came up last night with Mitch McBride. We recorded an episode last night with Mitch McBride, the Valorant shoutcaster, and this was what came up at the end, like that these challenges. I mean, you're right, they're there, and it's crap.
Yeah, so just from my own experience, I started playing Valorant to understand this game a little bit more, and it took, I think, 2 matches until I played with random people online, and I had one woman on my team or 2 women on my team, and she was sexually harassed by one of my co-players. A random stranger on the team. She was at the top of the leaderboard. She was doing amazing until she spoke, and the guy was just like being absolutely disgusting to her. And I didn't want to play anymore. Like, I spoke back against it, but like obviously the team falls apart at that point. Like, why would she still be invested in like making this team win? And every single woman that plays online with random strangers knows exactly this is not something rare. This happens like pretty much constantly, right? I know women that use voice changers. I know women that just don't use voice chat anymore,
which is key.
Yeah, it's a huge like competitive disadvantage. You can't just be just don't use voice, but like it's a team game. Yeah, like, and you're not building those communicative skills either. So if you even get good enough to just compete silently, still start making that leap to actually playing a professional team where you have to communicate, and people are probably not going to be as shitty because they're your teammates. It's a huge disadvantage. So I think it's good to create this women's only competition as a stepping stone to like just have this space where it's just them, and it's incredibly positive. Like all the women in the scene, they're all like pushing each other, and like our practice primarily of our team is actually against more established teams, and so is it of most of the women's team. But now there's like a big motivation. Okay, this is something that's attainable, and we can show the world we're actually quite good. The best women's teams, they are on a very high level. They're not on the high as the level yet as the co-ed teams, but it's getting there. And our team has improved tremendously since this program. And now it's one of those things. You have to be seen, right, to motivate others, and it's doing a brilliant job at this. And I love our Valorant team. I think they're one of the most brilliant people I ever worked with. Lots of them have a better mentality than I've seen in like 15 years esports veterans. And even in the toughest situations where I've seen teams fall apart and being mean to each other, they're supporting each other, and they're all in this together and like help each other get out of these dark spots. And we've just had them over for a week in Toronto. Most of them all of them are from America, but we had them over here to play in the last Game Changer event, even though it was online. But we all brought them together in one room and took care of everything outside of the competition. And was really, really fun for me because it was the first time actually now that I got to meet them in person.
Oh yeah, because lockdowns. Yeah, I mean it's a weird one. Yeah, I'm going to the events now, and it's fantastic meeting people. I mean, this is why I love esports. I mean, I don't research esports. I research people in esports from my perspective. That I love the sense of community, and so many people are positive, and I always hate that the toxic few or the random unhappy person at home is disrupting. But for the majority, are just brilliant people having fun and socializing, and having played CS:GO for the last year and a half while locked down, I suddenly realized what people meant when they said I have friends that I've never met in real life, and it's wonderful. So I'm going to just ask you 2 more questions. So as you know, and you can't make it because you're going to a Rocket League tournament, but in December we're doing our first conference, which is on health and well-being in esports, which is mental, physical, and social. Actually, when we're talking about toxicity and gender stuff, is social. But I mean, you have carpal tunnel syndrome in both wrists, right?
So I'm not entirely sure if that was ever true. I know. I think that's on my Wikipedia.
It's on the web. It's on the web. Yeah,
it's on the web, and it is what I've thought for a very long time myself, because I was diagnosed with at least oncoming stages of it. But over like many years of meeting other people, having different opinions, and like finding out what works for me, I think I never had carpal tunnel. I think I was misdiagnosed pretty early on when that happened, and it's more likely it was tendonitis, that it was more related to like tenseness and tendons in general and muscle. than it was ever carpal tunnel. And I know carpal tunnel is often overdiagnosed in
The
pro
de
gamers.
facto, yeah. But I mean, we
Yeah.
had Gamer Doc on the podcast. She's going to be the first one of season 2. And, you know, just talking to you and listening to this, you can see the value of medicine and esports. And you've also talked about your approach to the mental health of your teams and your players, which is great. I love talking to you because you're actually passionate about looking after the people that you're working with and you know, well, not in charge of, but looking after, I think is a nicer word. I wouldn't say you're in charge. You're more like you're looking after them in your managerial role. I mean, what are the main things you think you'd like to see change in terms of health and wellness in esports? What are the topics you want to pursue or think you need to be seen to?
First of all, by the way, I've worked with 1HP, so like they're brilliant people, and I've utilized them for our team already. So yeah, just love everybody on that team. So I guess it's really basic, like common sense things that need to change in esports. First of all, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We know professional sports and how it has developed in the last 20 years, which professional sports wasn't always very scientifically approached either.
No, Arsene Wenger took over Arsenal in 1996 and banned Mars bars and made them eat healthy food. It's only 25 years ago since one of the top Premier League clubs said, "Eat pasta, not chocolate."
Yeah. It's not, it's still relatively recent, but they still have a few decades, ahead of us. And in the past, people were smoking, right, like right before match or even on the field. It's not that.
I did it as a teenager. What are you doing? Having a cigarette half time.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, a little bit further, like Babe Ruth, and some people were like known for like just chain smoking while competing. But obviously we've evolved from that. But yes, diet is probably something that's maybe not as important as in professional sports to like optimize as much. But it's definitely the one thing that I'm trying to instill in all my players is like, if there's one thing you can do for yourself, is moving away from refined sugars. Like, I'm not gonna force anybody to have like 3 super healthy, completely balanced meal every single day. But if you could just cut out the energy drinks and like the candy bars, you're like 80% there, and then we can start thinking about those other 20% of like, let's maybe have like one more salad a day. Let's have like think about protein a little bit, or like, do you have enough B12 and iron?
No, but hold on. It actually might be as important. I mean, I think maybe the biggest difference might be that professional players might need to eat to put on more muscle mass. But if we're talking esports players, we're talking reflexes, we're talking brain, which is your, like that uses so much calories. I'm so hungry after doing really intensive work. So maybe, and this is where the science is going. So maybe you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so it is important, but I'm just saying it's not not as important, because you don't need to worry about, as I said, about like building like the most optimal body mass you could possibly imagine. Maybe I actually need a personal chef every single day, else that's like almost not attainable. But I do think timing of food matters a lot in esports, because it is a mental thing, and our brain can only process sugar, right? So I'm not gonna want to have a meal right before match that my body can't break down. And maybe there's place for a candy bar, but you have to think about it. You have to think about it.
If you win, they get a candy bar. If they win, you'll have the candy bars there. Come on, if you win now, I'll give you a Mars bar.
Or maybe you need a little bit of extra sugar right before a match, and maybe it's not a whole candy bar. Maybe it's just one bite of a candy bar, and then I'm okay with that. But maybe don't drink 500 ml of a Monster Energy drink with a ridiculous amount of sugar and a ridiculous amount of caffeine, and then you crash like right after, or like you spike way too high and get jittery. So
and also don't get all your water just before the game and have to pee halfway through.
No, exactly.
Stay hydrated throughout the day.
No, for sure, because esports matches are often also very unpredictable in timing. There's best of fives that last much longer than others, because it's not just a set time limit. So there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to timing food, and generally healthy lifestyles. And again, the first step for me is not, I'm not going to turn you into a professional athlete, but if you do 0 exercise versus you do 20 minutes of exercise a day, is a huge game changer. Where like, again, you're already 80% there, and once you're there, we can start thinking, how can we get those last like 5-10% out of like your physical routine a week? But
we see Joanne Donoghue and Seth Jenny had a paper. They did a symposium for us, and it was about taking a 6-minute walk in between games can really benefit you.
Yeah.
You know, and so the science is there, and I'll share a lot of links with you after we finish recording this, because there's stuff that is really fascinating about performance. I mean, okay, so just to finish up, because you've been very generous with your time here. It's 7 o'clock in the evening here, and your day is only starting, so you've got longer left in your life according to time zones, if I'm reading that right. But the last one is, you know, forget the health and stuff. Like generally, if I said to you, okay, I'm giving you a crack team of researchers, right?
Yeah.
Anyone you want from Esport Research Network, top 5 professors, what would you like to see researched? What would you commission them to do?
Okay, that's actually one thing that I've thought about a lot, and you kind of approached the topic that you're very hungry after match. I would like to have especially my 3 Starcraft players, but maybe it would be interesting to see the differences between games. I'd love to measure caloric consumption of pro gamers while doing like a tournament, or while having, you know, a 6-8 hours practice session and like how much are people burning with something where people think this is not a very physical activity. Because, you know, there is some research we already know about that chess players burn quite a bit of calories during their tournaments, and I wouldn't be surprised if esports is, you know, similar, maybe even more intense than chess, because there's a physical component that is more there than just, you know, everything is physical. We always make this stupid distinction between the brain and the rest of the body, but the brain is physical too, right? So I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that.
I think after I share all this research, you're going to be on to the CEO going, we need a chef for the guys.
Oh,
he said you don't need a personal chef. You go, we need a team chef.
Well, you know, we already, you know, I'm definitely thinking about stuff like this. You know, maybe not a permanent one, but like food is a big thing for me. And when we had the team over, we learned a lot about, you know, we had catering and everything, and I looked at the menus and made sure it's like well balanced. But then sometimes the catering arrived and the game still lasted like another hour. If you have a personal chef there, things get a lot easier when it comes to the timing. But yeah, it's not crazy to spend that money on like getting those last 3% out of your team. It's like actually even like a good investment for
absolutely.
the team.
Well, Dario, thank you very much for your time. And if anyone's interested, I'll have all the links for everything for TLO, or Dario Wünsch, as he's known in real life. And so thank you very much, Dario.
Yeah, it was great. Lovely talking to you, and I hope to see you around.
Chapter